The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanations, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
For 12 long summers, workers labored in the sun-baked earth of western Syria, digging, probing, turning back the centuries. An Italian archaeologist, Professor Paolo Matti, excavated Ebla, capital of a previously unknown Bronze Age kingdom. Then, in the fall of 1974, as his 13th season of digging was about to end, he unexpectedly unearthed the missing piece to an ancient biblical puzzle. After 4,000 years, a written record, independent of the Bible, confirmed the existence of Sodom and Gomorrah. One crucial question remains: where did they exist? In 4,000 years of recorded history, Jerusalem has been ruled by Turkish sultans, Arab sheiks, Roman consuls, Crusader princes, and Hebrew kings. Each reign left a mark. Yet the city itself remains the sacred source of three great faiths. Its walls enclose Solomon's temple, the Stations of the Cross, the Dome of the Rock, names that date to biblical times. In Jerusalem's streets, past and present flow visibly together. Jesus walked here, and Mohammed and David. Its shrines are evidence of a vast and ancient history. And before them, man humbles himself. The actual stories of the past remain shrouded in myth. The land guards mysteries, for it is old, older even than the earliest accounts preserved in Holy Scripture. East and south of Jerusalem, fertile fields turn to stony wilderness. Here, ancient man left few traces. Across this arid expanse roam modern Bedouins, people who hardly differ from herdsmen who wandered this same mountainous scrubland in biblical times. Nomad ways have remained constant. The endless foraging for pasture, for water, for new campsites, and then, inevitably, moving on. They resist all change, clinging to their simple black tents, their animals, to time-tested traditions. Bedouin storytellers maintain there were once lush valleys here, but they themselves have stripped the land by gathering firewood, feeding their goat herds. They have turned green fields to desert. Still, the nomads endure, as they have for countless generations, somehow finding nourishment in the wilderness. Stories of the land and of the past are clouded by the legends of nomadic tribesmen and might have remained obscure but for the searching of scientists. A series of spectacular finds began to open doors to a forgotten past. At Masada, archaeologists discovered a long-lost fortress, the final desert stronghold of Jewish resistance to the Roman Empire. North along the barren Dead Sea shore, more ruins were unearthed, believed to be the monastery of legendary mystics, the Essenes, whose gentle teachings the young Jesus might have studied. They too had vanished, enveloped by the desert. Then, in 1947, came another sensational discovery, a cache of Essene texts hidden in a remote cave, further proof of man's long presence in the wilderness. The Bedouin alone were not surprised. High on cliffs overlooking the Dead Sea, from time immemorial, nomad folklore has traditionally labeled a jutting thumb of rock salt Lot's wife. Somewhere here, somewhere within sight of this rock, according to an ancient story preserved in the biblical accounts of Genesis, once existed a lush and fertile plain and a league of wealthy cities known as Sodom and Gomorrah. Their remains have never been found. The biblical accounts are clear. As the Hebrew elder Abraham led his nomadic tribe across the rocky hills, his nephew, Lot, wandered down into a fertile plain, the Valley of Sodom. Biblical storytellers peopled it with rich and decadent townsmen, sensualists, celebrants of the profane. The geography is explicit. By the Salt Sea, under the Moab Hills. But for 4,000 years, man has searched in vain for some trace of the wicked cities of the plain, for evidence that they were something more than biblical parable. One of Israel's foremost archaeologists, Dr. Avram Biran.
Well, let me make something quite clear before we say anything else. Archaeology is not here to prove or disprove the Bible. The Bible, as a book of divine inspiration, needs no proof. But the Bible contains a lot of historical memories. And what archaeology does is to illustrate these memories. The amazing thing about archaeological research has been that the more we excavate, the more we uncover the past, the more we get evidence that these historical memories are correct.
Archaeology seeks out small clues to the past. Sun, rain, and wind have etched this land. Man seems to have made only a slight impression. Yet the soil can reveal layer after layer of cultural sediment, the high water marks of armies, conquerors, once mighty civilizations. From these long-buried clues, often no more than a few scattered stones, archaeologists, like detectives, must piece together ancient mysteries. The first break in solving the puzzling biblical legend of Sodom and Gomorrah came in the fall of 1974. Near the modern Syrian town of Tel Mardik, a chain of laborers employed by an Italian archaeological expedition cut slowly into a tell. A man-made hill composed of the stratified remains of past civilizations. Led by Professors Paolo Matti and Giovanni Pettinato of the University of Rome, the dig had gradually uncovered the city of Ebla, large and wealthy capital of a previously unknown Bronze Age Canaanite kingdom. Then, near the end of their 13th excavating season, they unearthed treasure far more priceless than the mute riches of gold and silver, the royal archives of Ebla. Treaties, legal documents, tax records were preserved on 16,000 clay tablets, covered in wedge cuneiform, an early form of writing pressed by palace scribes into wet clay. The tablets listed names associated with the early accounts of Genesis. The find was astounding. Trade records from the 3rd millennium BC documented business transactions with the cities of the plain. For the first time in 40 centuries, sources independent of the Bible confirmed the existence of Sodom and Gomorrah and placed them near the Dead Sea. The veil of mystery at long last had been lifted. Yet, if Sodom and Gomorrah existed, what happened to them? Here, where biblical accounts place them, there exists today only a vast wasteland divided by the Israeli-Jordanian frontier, the Dead Sea, 1,300 feet below sea level, the lowest point on the Earth's surface. Its brackish waters are completely lifeless, 25% salt. It drains a desert tableland where temperatures often reach 125 degrees. The Bedouins say not even a bird can fly across the Dead Sea without dying. Yet the Bible places Sodom and Gomorrah exactly here. Sodom, 1900 BC. Motion pictures have depicted the tumultuous populace of the wicked cities of the plain. Their reputation has survived 40 centuries. Embedded in this legendary image is the solution to the mysterious end of Sodom and Gomorrah. Frescoes painted in 1900 BC inside the tomb of Egypt's border governor depict new tribes, nomads, who had begun to emerge from the trackless wilderness. The Egyptians called them Habiru. The desert's precarious natural balance allows no excess, no room for deviation from the unending basic struggle to survive. Forged by the desert's harsh, immutable laws, the nomad's faith reflected the overreaching sky, vast and formless. Led by stern patriarchs, the tribal caravans searched for new pastures. How inviting a tree-lined horizon must have seemed to dusty Hebrew wanderers 40 centuries ago. The lush lands they entered were held by a people known to us as the Canaanites. Tillers of fertile fields, clever artisans, sophisticated townsmen. Such people likely inhabited the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Fertility lay at the core of their religion. We know that they performed ecstatic rites that openly attempted to fuse the sensual and the spiritual. Their gods and goddesses have survived them. Baal, mighty thunderer, bringer of life-giving rain, chief deity of ancient Canaan. This image of the Great Mother symbolized the fertile earth. Goddess of many names, Ishtar, Isis, Astarte, her heavenly sign was the planet Venus. Within her, the forces of life and death mystically entwined. Priests guarded her mysteries. Among such men went to dwell the Hebrew Lot. According to the biblical story, recreated in film, angels came to Sodom to find Lot. They warned him to abandon the city, to renew his nomad ways. Lot was torn by doubt. Sodom's excesses repelled the angels. Sodomites threatened to attack the heavenly visitors.
Put them in the kingdom. Yes. Bring them out unto us.
Bring them out, that we may know them.
Whosoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place. For the Lord has sent us to destroy it.
A flash of brilliant light blinded the crowd.
Arise. Take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest they be consumed in the punishment of the city.
I cannot see.
I cannot see.
I cannot see. Flee for your life. Flee to the hills, lest thou be consumed. Look not behind thee.
Absolute faith was demanded of Lot. The angels warned his family to flee without once looking back. Lot's wife wavered.
No!
Turned, according to biblical accounts, into a pillar of salt. As if to confirm the biblical contention, there are columns of rock salt overlooking the Dead Sea today. A portrait of the Dead Sea was made from a NASA Earth Resources satellite. The waters are divided by a spit of land called by the Bedouin El Lisan, the tongue. To the south along the shore, 5 riverbeds score the rocky land. Since biblical times, 5 freshwater streams have flowed down from the Moab hills. Today they empty into the Dead Sea. Could they once have continued onto a fertile plain, watering towns, irrigating lush fields? To the north of the El Lisan spit lie depths up to 1,300 feet. Yet the waters of the southern half are less than 10 feet deep. 40 centuries ago, was El Lisan the Dead Sea's south shore? What could have destroyed its banks? Tar, mineral pitch, bubbles to the surface off El Lisan. Nearby, modern Israelis have struck oil. There are also rich deposits of natural gas. The Israeli proprietor of a Dead Sea hot springs.
Here in En-Gedi, we have the sulfur spring. Nature water came from the ground. And you can see here in the water, you can see the sulfur. You can see this sulfur. If you burn this sulfur, it gives you poison gas. But as a
In biblical times, sulfur was known as brimstone. Pitch, oil, gas, sulfur. A volatile mixture. Dr. Bruce Bolt, internationally acclaimed seismologist.
The extraordinary Rift Valley of the Dead Sea is one of the deepest points that we have on the surface of the Earth. It's bounded on the western side by a great fault which runs from the Gulf of Iliad up towards Antioch. And this has been the site of many great earthquakes.
Could an earthquake have been a link in a chain of events that led to a massive explosion in 1900 BC?
Earthquakes are produced by the slow building up of strain in the rocks of the Earth, such as occurs along the Rift Valley in Palestine. However, it's been suggested that the tidal forces between the other planets and the Sun and the Moon on the Earth might subtly vary the strain field and trigger earthquakes. And there have been many reports associated with earthquakes of lights in the sky, flashes of lightning, glowing skies, and so on. But when I read the biblical account of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, I can reconstruct something like this in my mind, that there might have been a very great earthquake. The actual mechanism for this is not at all understood. There could have been a great avalanche which came down from the rift. The opening up of the rift might have released some gases, some petroleum gases. The fires would have ignited this. There could have been explosions. The sulfur, which is, of course, brimstone, might have well caught on fire, and sulfurous gases would have been given out by the fires. So I think if we put together all the natural phenomena which could occur there south of the Dead Sea, we can see that as the years went by, there could have been an account grow up very similar to that which is so briefly given in the Bible. Well, it's fascinating for scientists to work as detectives on these ancient problems. The situation is clearly so complicated that to reach the ultimate cause of such a catastrophe is to stretch every piece of scientific knowledge that we have at the present time. There is an ultimate cause for it. For many people, the ultimate cause would be God.
Clues point to the Dead Sea, to a solution to the mystifying biblical puzzle. Yet no material evidence of Sodom and Gomorrah, not a single blackened pottery shard, has ever been found here. Israeli archaeologist Dr. Avram Biran.
Now the difficulties are that undoubtedly Sodom and Gomorrah are covered under the silt of the Dead Sea. And until something happens to remove the silt at the bottom of the Dead Sea on the southern part, which is not very deep, I don't think we have a chance of finding Sodom and Gomorrah. However, if we do, as for example we are doing now in removing some of the water for the manufacture of potash and bromide, and the earth will be uncovered, it is very possible that under 1 or 2 or 3 feet of silt you will find remains of a city of the 2nd millennium BC, which would be Sodom and Gomorrah.
Coming up next, In Search Of continues with a probe into the possibility that Joshua really did bring the walls of Jericho tumbling down. Then agents race against time to stop a rash of drug tampering on FBI The Untold Stories. And later tonight, Top Secret Missions of the CIA takes you on an operation to kidnap a terrorist at 9.